Hey, welcome. Today we're diving into a single moment, just after Jesus said those famous words, "It is finished." It's a tiny detail, really, but it unlocks one of the biggest ideas in the entire Bible. So, let's jump in.
So you've heard that old saying, right? All roads lead to Rome. It's not just a clever phrase, it was literally true. And you know what? It actually gives us the perfect way to understand what we're talking about today.
Okay, so picture this. The Roman road network was like a massive bicycle wheel. Right at the center, the hub, was the Roman Forum, basically point zero. And from there, you had almost 250,000 miles of roads spreading out across the empire. It didn't matter where you were. If you got on a main road, it would eventually take you right to the center. Well, believe it or not, the Bible is built in a really similar way. It's not just a random collection of books. It's this incredibly designed network where every single road, every prophecy, every law, every piece of history is all pointing to one single central event.
And what's that central point? What's that Roman forum for all of Scripture? It's Jesus, specifically his death on the cross. Every single one of those roads that God laid down over thousands of years was always headed for this one moment. Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you got to remember the backstory. And the big theme of that backstory is separation. It all starts in the Garden of Eden, where sin creates this huge gap between people and God. Later on, that separation gets a physical address, the tabernacle and the temple. They were built with all these barriers and courtyards. You could only go so far in. And the biggest barrier of all, that giant thick veil that sealed off the most holy place. Only one person, the high priest, could go in there, and only one day a year. The message couldn't have been clearer. You can come this close, but you can't come all the way in. But then, on the cross, Jesus says those three words, "It is finished." And with that, the work was done. The debt was paid. And that barrier, that huge curtain keeping everyone out, it was about to come crashing down, finally opening the road all the way to the very center.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that exact moment. It's Friday afternoon up on the hill of Golgotha. Now, this particular day was called the Day of Preparation. Why? Because it was the day right before the Sabbath, the Jewish day of rest. And the rule was simple. All work, any work, had to be finished before the Sabbath started.
And man, were they on a deadline, a serious one. Jesus dies at about 3 p.m., but according to Jewish law, specifically from the book of Deuteronomy, you could not leave an executed person's body out overnight. It had to be buried that same day. Since the Sabbath officially kicked off at sundown, around 6 p.m., they had this frantic 3-hour window to get not one, but 3 bodies down from crosses and into a tomb.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just any Sabbath. The Bible calls it a high day. That's because this particular Sabbath fell right at the beginning of a huge festival, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This was the celebration that remembered how Israel escaped slavery in Egypt. You know the story. They had to leave in such a hurry, they didn't even have time to let their bread dough rise.
And the symbolism here, it's just so rich. See, in the Bible, leaven or yeast is often a symbol for sin, for corruption spreading through something. So unleavened bread, that's all about purity. It's also about speed, right? Grabbing what you have and leaving the old life behind, fast. And get this, that journey out of Egypt involved walking through the Red Sea, which the Apostle Paul later points to as a kind of baptism, a total washing away of that old life of slavery. See how the pieces are fitting together?
So you've got this insane deadline, it's packed with all this symbolic meaning, and right in the middle of it all, another piece of ancient prophecy is about to click into place, down to the tiniest detail. This is our next big stop on this road to the center.
Okay, a quick, grim detail about crucifixion. It was an absolutely brutal, slow way to die from suffocation. To get a breath, you had to push up with your legs. So if the soldiers wanted to speed things up, they'd just take a heavy club and break your legs. Simple as that. You couldn't push up anymore, and you'd die in minutes. So to make that 6 p.m. deadline, the Jewish leaders went to Pilate and asked him to have the soldiers do just that.
But wait, this is where a super old, very specific law pops up. We're talking hundreds of years earlier, when God gave the instructions for the original Passover lamb, the sacrifice that started it all. He gave one very clear rule, right there in the book of Exodus. You shall not break any of its bones. And just like that, the prophecy is fulfilled. The soldiers go to the first man, break his legs. They go to the second man, break his legs. But when they get to Jesus, they can see he's already gone. So they don't break his legs. And those soldiers, with absolutely no clue what they were doing, made sure that Jesus perfectly fit the description of the true Passover lamb, a perfect sacrifice with no broken bones.
So his legs aren't broken, but these soldiers still have to be 100% sure he's dead. I mean, their own lives were on the line if a prisoner somehow survived. So what one of them does next is, for him, just standard procedure. But for us, watching this story unfold, it's another piece of prophecy locking into place.
Yeah, on the surface, this was just about procedure. The soldier takes his spear, he pierces Jesus' side just to make sure. Job done. But in the grand story the Bible is telling, this single action was so much more than that.
Think about it. This one thrust of a spear fulfilled prophecies written centuries before it happened. The prophet Zechariah wrote, "They will look on him whom they have pierced." And Isaiah, in that incredible chapter about the suffering servant, said it plainly, "He was pierced for our transgressions."
And did you catch the wording there? The prophecies don't say a soldier will pierce him. They say they will look on him whom they have pierced. And that's huge. The theological point is that, yeah, one soldier was holding the spear, but it was our sin, our transgressions, our stuff that held him to that cross in the first place.
All right, this brings us to the final destination on our journey, and it all hangs on what happens next. Because when that spear pierces Jesus' side, John, who was right there watching, makes sure to write down a very specific and, frankly, kind of strange detail. He says, "At once there came out blood and water." Now why? Why did John think that was so important to include? I mean, why not just say he was pierced and move on? Well, it's because that little detail, blood and water, is absolutely packed with layers of meaning. You can think of it like 4 layers. Layer 1, it's physical proof. Medically, the separation of blood cells and clear plasma is something that can happen after death, especially a death like crucifixion. So it was proof he was really truly dead. Layer 2, it was proof of his humanity. Some early groups tried to say Jesus wasn't really a physical human, just a spirit. Well, this proves he was flesh and blood. Layer 3, and this is big, symbolism. In the Bible, blood is all about atonement, the payment for sin, and water, that's about cleansing and new life. And layer 4, a lot of people see this as a picture of the 2 main practices in Christianity. The blood points to communion, and the water points to baptism. But the deepest layer, the ultimate point, is this mind-blowing reversal. Go all the way back to the Old Testament, to the plagues in Egypt. What was one of the first signs of God's judgment? The water of the Nile turned to blood, bringing death. Even in the book of Revelation, judgment is pictured as water turning to blood. So the pattern is, judgment turns life-giving water into death. But here, at the cross, the whole thing gets flipped on its head. First comes the blood, the payment, and it's followed by the water of new life. The cross literally takes the very pattern of judgment and reverses it into the pattern of salvation.
So let's go back to where we started. If the cross really is the point zero, the center of the whole biblical story, where all the roads meet, well, that leaves us with a pretty cool question to chew on, doesn't it? How does knowing where it all ends up change the way we read all those ancient roads, all the laws, the prophecies, the histories that lead us there? It kind of suggests that every single story, every detail, is a signpost, pointing us right here to this one moment and this one finished work.